Have you ever noticed how some things people say can completely shift your perspective on a situation? Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine recently went through something that made her question everything she believed about her relationship. She found out her partner was keeping secrets, and what followed was a conversation that changed the way she saw trust forever. Now, imagine you're in her shoes. What would be the first thing someone says to justify their actions when they've crossed a line? Let's break this down and understand what's really happening in these moments. The psychology behind excuses. What lies beneath? When someone is caught in a situation where their integrity is questioned, their immediate reaction can reveal much about their inner psychology. In the case of infidelity, excuses are often the first line of defense. But why? Excuses aren't just words. They are psychological shields, crafted to protect the image a person holds of themselves and wants others to believe. For a woman who cheats, her initial response is not just about justifying her actions, but also about managing how you perceive her. The goal is to soften the blow of her betrayal and to shift the emotional focus away from her actions. Research in psychology reveals that people often default to excuses because of cognitive dissonance, the discomfort experienced when actions contradict personal values or societal norms. For example, if she sees herself as a caring partner but knows she has violated that image, her mind scrambles to bridge the gap. This often results in statements that redirect attention. "I wouldn't have done this if you had shown me more affection." Such remarks serve two purposes. First, they dilute her responsibility, and second, they sow doubt in your mind, making you question whether you contributed to her actions. Excuses can also be deeply rooted in survival instincts. Confrontation triggers stress, and stress activates a fight-or-flight response. In this case, fighting often takes the form of verbal justifications. This is not to suggest that every excuse is premeditated. Many are spontaneous, driven by an urgent need to protect oneself in a vulnerable moment. The more you understand these dynamics, the less likely you are to be manipulated by the emotional haze of her words. Emotional manipulation. How words are used as weapons. Emotional manipulation is one of the most powerful tools a person can use in moments of conflict, especially when they are trying to avoid accountability. When a woman cheats, her choice of words in the first conversation is rarely random. It's often calculated, consciously or subconsciously, to influence your emotions and deflect attention from her actions. Words become weapons, not necessarily to hurt you directly, but to reshape the narrative, placing herself in a less guilty or even victimized position. One common tactic of emotional manipulation is leveraging guilt. For example, she might say, "You've been so distant lately. I felt so alone." A statement like this not only minimizes her own responsibility, but also places the spotlight on you, making you feel as though her betrayal was a response to your perceived shortcomings. This tactic taps into your insecurities, creating a dynamic where you may start questioning your own actions instead of focusing on hers. The brilliance of emotional manipulation lies in its ability to sow doubt in your mind while allowing her to subtly regain control of the conversation. Another key component of emotional manipulation is the use of vulnerability as a shield. She may appear overly emotional, crying or expressing regret in a way that seems sincere, but strategically prevents you from pressing further. The display of vulnerability can disarm you, making it difficult to challenge her without feeling like you're being unfair or cruel. It's a way of controlling the emotional tone of the interaction, ensuring that your anger or hurt is softened by her apparent pain. What's even more unsettling is how these manipulative tactics can be deeply ingrained, learned over time as ways to navigate difficult situations. They are not always conscious decisions. Rather, they are reflexive responses aimed at self-preservation. The key to breaking free from this dynamic is to recognize the patterns. Once you understand how emotional manipulation operates, you can protect yourself from being drawn into its web. Instead of reacting emotionally, step back, assess the situation logically, and ensure that the focus remains on the issue at hand. The power of denial. Why some women shift the blame. Denial is one of the most instinctive and powerful defense mechanisms people use when faced with situations that threaten their self-image or emotional stability. When a woman is caught cheating, her immediate reaction may be to deny responsibility and shift the blame onto someone or something else. This isn't always done out of malice. It's often a subconscious response rooted in the fear of judgment, rejection, or loss of control over the situation. But why does denial play such a dominant role, and how does it manifest in these moments? Psychologically, denial helps to protect the individual from the emotional discomfort of accepting responsibility. Admitting to an act of betrayal forces a confrontation with one's own moral failings, and this can be overwhelming. Instead of facing this internal conflict, denial allows her to maintain a version of reality where she isn't entirely at fault. She might say, "I only did it because you pushed me away," or, "If you hadn't been so busy all the time, this wouldn't have happened." These statements are not just about avoiding blame. They are attempts to reconstruct the narrative so that her actions appear reactive rather than deliberate. Blame shifting is particularly effective because it redirects the focus. Instead of analyzing her betrayal, you might find yourself defending your actions or questioning whether you were partly responsible. This tactic exploits natural tendencies to self-reflect and empathize, making you more likely to accept some level of fault. For example, if she accuses you of being emotionally unavailable, you might start examining your behavior instead of holding her accountable for hers. This redirection is a subtle yet powerful way to disarm confrontation and regain a sense of control. What makes denial and blame shifting so insidious is how seamlessly they can blend into emotional conversations. Often, they don't come across as outright lies, but as partial truths mixed with exaggerations or omissions. This makes them harder to identify and challenge, especially when emotions are running high. To navigate these situations effectively, it's crucial to remain grounded. Pay attention to patterns in the conversation. If she consistently redirects the blame without taking any accountability, it's a red flag. Understanding the psychology behind denial not only helps you see through the smoke, but also empowers you to respond with clarity and assertiveness. Signs of guilt in her first reaction. The first reaction someone gives when confronted with their wrongdoing can be incredibly telling, especially when guilt is involved. When a woman cheats, her initial response is often laced with subtle signs of guilt, even if she's trying to mask it. Guilt, as a psychological response, is powerful and difficult to suppress entirely. It often leaks through in the form of body language, tone of voice, and the choice of words. Understanding these signs can help you discern her true emotional state and intentions. One of the most common indicators of guilt is defensiveness. If she immediately becomes overly defensive or tries to justify her actions without being asked, it could be a sign that she is grappling with the internal conflict of knowing she has done something wrong. Statements like, "I only did it because you weren't there for me," or "It didn't mean anything, you're overreacting," are attempts to alleviate her own discomfort by rationalizing her behavior. These justifications may sound logical on the surface, but are often rooted in her need to protect her self-image and avoid deeper accountability. Another telltale sign is inconsistency in her story. Guilt can cause someone to panic, leading to hasty explanations that don't add up. If her responses seem rehearsed or overly elaborate, it might be because she is trying to control the narrative while dealing with the anxiety of being caught. Pay attention to any hesitations, contradictions, or sudden changes in her version of events. These can be red flags that her guilt is influencing her ability to provide a straightforward account. Body language is another window into guilt. Avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, or appearing unusually restless can signal that she is uncomfortable with the situation and struggling to maintain composure. Her voice may also betray her emotions, with fluctuations in tone or a noticeable shakiness when she speaks. These physical signs, while not definitive proof, are important to consider alongside her verbal responses. Finally, guilt can sometimes manifest as overcompensation. She may suddenly shift into an overly apologetic or affectionate mode, showering you with reassurances and promises. While this might seem like genuine remorse, it can also be a way to divert attention from the betrayal itself and prevent you from probing further. Understanding these behaviors is not about catching her in the act, but about recognizing the emotional and psychological undercurrents at play. Guilt, when left unaddressed, often drives people to act in ways that reveal more than they intend. The role of justification in a woman's cheating behavior. Justification is a psychological mechanism that plays a central role in how people, including women, navigate feelings of guilt, shame, and responsibility after cheating. When a woman cheats, she often relies on justification to make sense of her actions, not just to you, but to herself as well. This process helps her reduce the internal conflict between her values and her behavior, making it easier for her to cope with the consequences. But what exactly does justification look like, and why does it hold such power in these situations? At its core, justification is about reframing the narrative to align actions with perceived needs or circumstances. For example, she might say, "I felt neglected," or "I wasn't happy anymore, and I needed to feel alive again." These statements do not deny the act of cheating, but attempt to place it in a context that minimizes her responsibility and makes her actions seem understandable, even inevitable. By framing her behavior as a reaction rather than a choice, she shifts the focus from moral accountability to emotional causation, making it easier for her to rationalize what she's done. From a psychological perspective, this is a way to avoid cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when someone's actions contradict their beliefs or values, creating mental discomfort. By justifying her behavior, she reduces this discomfort and preserves a sense of self that aligns with being a good person. However, this justification often comes at the expense of an honest dialogue. Instead of openly addressing the betrayal, the focus shifts to the circumstances that forced her to act as she did. Another dimension of justification is its ability to redirect emotions. Instead of allowing the conversation to center on her actions and their consequences, justification often redirects attention to external factors, your behavior, the state of the relationship, or external pressures. This serves a dual purpose. It deflects blame while also appealing to your empathy, making you more likely to engage with her perspective rather than confronting her actions. Statements like, "You never had time for me," can lead you to question your own role in the situation, diluting the accountability she might otherwise face. Understanding the role of justification doesn't mean excusing the behavior. It means recognizing it for what it is, a coping mechanism designed to mitigate guilt and control the narrative. The more aware you are of how justification works, the better equipped you are to navigate these conversations. Staying grounded, focusing on the facts, and refusing to get drawn into emotional diversions can help you maintain clarity and ensure the conversation remains productive. Why she mentions you didn't care enough. First, when a woman cheats and is confronted about her actions, one of the most common phrases you might hear is, "You didn't care enough." This statement, while seemingly simple, carries a complex mix of emotional dynamics and psychological intent. It's not just an accusation. It's a defense mechanism, a redirection, and a deeply rooted emotional expression all rolled into one. Understanding why this is often her first response requires diving into the psychological and relational dynamics at play. At its core, this statement serves to shift the focus from her actions to your perceived shortcomings. By saying, "You didn't care enough," she is not denying her behavior, but instead reframing the conversation around the conditions that in her mind led to her decision. This is a form of blame shifting that taps into your emotions, making you feel as though her actions were a reaction to something you did or didn't do. It's a tactic designed to elicit guilt and deflect accountability, subtly encouraging you to look inward rather than at the betrayal itself. This response also reflects a psychological need to rationalize her behavior. Cheating is often accompanied by feelings of guilt and cognitive dissonance, as it clashes with personal values and societal norms. To resolve this internal conflict, she may convince herself that her actions were justified because of the emotional neglect she felt. Even if this neglect was more perceived than real, framing her infidelity in this way helps her reduce the discomfort of acknowledging her wrongdoing. However, this statement also sheds light on underlying emotional needs that were perhaps not being met in the relationship. While it doesn't excuse the betrayal, it does provide insight into her emotional state. When she says, "You didn't care enough," it often reflects a deeper sense of hurt or disconnection she may have been feeling. This doesn't mean the claim is entirely accurate. It's her perception, but it does highlight the importance of understanding how unresolved emotional gaps in a relationship can lead to destructive outcomes. From a relational standpoint, this response can be seen as a test of empathy. By putting the spotlight on you, she might be gauging your reaction. Will you validate her feelings, or will you focus solely on the betrayal? This is a critical moment in the conversation, because your response can shape the trajectory of the discussion. It's important to recognize the tactic without dismissing the emotions behind it. Acknowledging her feelings without letting her deflect responsibility is a delicate balance, but a necessary one to maintain clarity and fairness in the conversation. Ultimately, the phrase, "You didn't care enough," is a blend of defense, deflection, and emotional expression. While it is crucial to hold her accountable for her actions, understanding the layers behind such a statement can provide valuable insights into both her mindset and the dynamics of the relationship. Projection. Turning the tables to avoid responsibility. Projection is a defense mechanism that allows individuals to shift their own feelings, actions, or shortcomings onto someone else. When a woman cheats, projection can be one of the first strategies she employs to navigate the emotional fallout. Instead of confronting her own guilt or wrongdoing, she may attempt to turn the tables by accusing you of behaviors or attitudes that mirror her own. This tactic serves to redirect attention, deflect accountability, and create a sense of shared responsibility for her actions. For instance, she might say, "You're the one who's been distant," or "You've probably thought about being with someone else too." These statements aren't just casual accusations, they're attempts to project her own internal conflicts onto you. By framing you as the source of the relationship's problems, she minimizes her own role in the betrayal and shifts the emotional weight of the situation. This is not only a way to avoid responsibility, but also a method to create doubt in your mind, making you question your own actions and feelings. Psychologically, projection stems from the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. Cheating creates a contradiction between her self-image, e.g., being a loyal or moral person, and her actions. To reconcile this inner conflict, she may unconsciously transfer the negative emotions associated with her behavior onto you. This provides temporary relief from the guilt and shame she might feel, but it also undermines the possibility of an honest and constructive conversation about the relationship. Projection also taps into the natural human tendency to defend oneself when accused. When she accuses you of being emotionally unavailable or having similar thoughts of infidelity, your instinct might be to defend yourself, shifting the focus of the conversation entirely. This deflection is a powerful way to control the narrative, ensuring that her actions are not the sole subject of scrutiny. Instead of addressing the betrayal, you might find yourself explaining your behavior, which takes the pressure off her and dilutes the seriousness of her actions. One of the most challenging aspects of projection is how convincingly it can be presented. It's not always a deliberate act of manipulation. Often, it's a deeply ingrained psychological response that feels entirely real to the person projecting. This makes it harder to identify and even harder to counter without escalating the conflict. However, recognizing projection for what it is, a redirection tactic, can help you navigate the conversation with greater clarity. To address projection effectively, it's essential to remain focused on the core issue at hand. Acknowledge her feelings without accepting misplaced blame, and gently but firmly steer the conversation back to the topic of her actions and their consequences. Understanding the psychological underpinnings of projection not only helps you see through the tactic, but also empowers you to maintain a position of strength and clarity in emotionally charged situations. How rationalization shapes her response. Rationalization is one of the most common psychological strategies people use to explain their behavior in a way that aligns with their internal narrative. When a woman cheats, rationalization often becomes a central part of her response, both as a way to justify her actions to herself and to others. This mental process involves creating seemingly logical explanations for decisions or behaviors that deep down conflict with her values or the expectations of the relationship. Understanding how rationalization works can provide valuable insight into her mindset and the dynamics of the situation. When confronted, she might say things like, "I wasn't feeling loved, so I needed to find it somewhere else," or, "We've been growing apart for so long, it just happened." These statements serve a dual purpose. They minimize her responsibility while simultaneously making her actions seem reasonable or even inevitable. Rationalization allows her to frame her infidelity as a reaction to external circumstances, rather than as a conscious choice. This not only softens the moral implications of her actions, but also shifts the conversation toward the relationship's shortcomings rather than her betrayal. From a psychological standpoint, rationalization acts as a defense mechanism to reduce cognitive dissonance. Cheating often creates a stark contrast between a person's self-image, e.g., as a loyal or moral partner, and their actions. By rationalizing her behavior, she bridges this gap, maintaining a sense of integrity while avoiding the discomfort of admitting wrongdoing. This process isn't always a conscious decision. It can be an automatic reaction to the emotional turmoil that arises from being caught or confronted. Rationalization also has the effect of influencing how you perceive the situation. By presenting her actions as a response to unmet needs or relational issues, she subtly appeals to your empathy. Instead of focusing on the betrayal itself, you might find yourself considering whether there's truth to her explanations. This shift in focus can dilute the gravity of her actions and even lead you to question your own role in the relationship's problems. While this may open the door for constructive discussions about the relationship, it can also be a tactic to avoid accountability. Another layer of rationalization is its role in self-preservation. Admitting to infidelity without justification requires confronting the full weight of the betrayal, which can be emotionally devastating. Rationalization provides an emotional buffer, allowing her to maintain a sense of control over the narrative. However, this can also create barriers to genuine communication and resolution. If the focus remains on justifying her actions rather than acknowledging the harm caused, it becomes difficult to rebuild trust or address the underlying issues. Understanding how rationalization shapes her response doesn't mean accepting it at face value. Instead, it equips you to see through the surface explanations and recognize the deeper emotional and psychological dynamics at play. By staying grounded and asking direct, clarifying questions, you can guide the conversation toward a more honest and meaningful dialogue. This clarity is essential for navigating the complex emotions and challenges that arise in the aftermath of betrayal. Understanding these emotional and psychological dynamics is the key to navigating such difficult situations with clarity and strength. Cheating is never just about the act itself. It's about the stories we tell ourselves and each other to make sense of it. By recognizing these patterns, you can protect your emotional well-being, hold others accountable, and make decisions that are right for you. Thank you for watching and being part of this important conversation. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.